Welcome, pudding people, to another episode of Everybody Loves Pudding. I'm your host, Ken Seymour. Today, I am joined by somebody that is just a legend in the industry. He is a director, he is a writer. I'm going to wager that he is a collector of rare and vintage vinyls. We have the amazing Dale Peterson.
You're right about the vinyls. You're right about the ones I did pass on part of my collection to my daughter. Luckily, she took it all up and she grabbed some of my favorites out of there, which I like that she was carrying on with that stuff.
My cousin and I, we just had a discussion about this. Our grandmother raised us well and infected us with the collectibles virus. So we each have our own things that we have to have collections for, and vinyl is definitely one of those things. So it's there's nothing like the feel and just the smell and the sound is different. And
You know what? From high school, that's the only thing that's the item I think that survived all my moves all over the years is all my records. I always kept my records.
it's memories. It's
Yeah,
memories
yeah,
pressed, and they live
yeah.
forever. I mean, you don't get the joy, the liner notes and
Oh
the
my gosh, or just
art.
sitting and exploring a whole side, like when it first comes out, it's magical.
Well, part of your history in music, I mean, you've dealt with, you've dealt with a lot of this. I was trying to get a handle on it because it's really hard to figure out where to start. So I figured, why not let the person that lived it tell us, how did you get into doing what it is that you do? I mean, you've directed some really cool videos and dealt with a lot of neat musicians. How did you begin?
Just by buying my first few cameras, and back when I was doing it, in the 90s, early 90s and late 80s, um beginning there was videotape, which it had this kind of strange look to it, which I did like. But I originally kind of learned. I bought an old Russian camera, and that had this really great lens on it, and I would go shoot bands, just local bands, and my so obviously my first love is music, and it's one of those things. I've heard Dave Grohl talk about it. He said when you're going through puberty, and all of a sudden, if you grab onto it and it becomes your thing, and it opens up a whole new world for you, you're kind of in this club, and that's the only way I can explain it, of what happened with my translation from video, which was really during the MTV, when they actually showed videos on there. During that era, it was just so great, because I'm not, I can play the guitar a little bit, but I love complicated music. I love great music, and I get visuals from it. So, and then that really translated into me getting started in this. So I just went and shot bands in Detroit. I had a friend who was in a band, and he introduced me to his manager, who eventually managed Eminem, and kind of that was my start right there.
Well, for those of us of a certain age that remember what it was like when MTV was the big thing, as their only real competition was VH1, which is no real competition, or maybe Much Music up on the northern sides of things. There were always The videos were always really kind of interesting to see the artistic take, whether it had something to do with the actual writing in the song that it was about, or whether it was just footage of the videos themselves. But one thing that I always wondered, and I know a lot of my friends had this kind of question as well. I mean, you look at movies and television shows, you have kind of an understanding of how that process goes. How do you get the actors that are going to be in there? Who's producing? How do you get the director for that? But it always seemed kind of unclear how the videos would end up being made for the actual music that we were listening to. Is it kind of the same process, or is it more of like an assignment sort of a thing?
It it's a different process in that you're dealing with when obviously the artist who um, once once I got to shooting where there was bigger budgets with record labels, the artists, you'd always come into a room and sometimes the artist would have a whole concept of what they want to do, and then I would try to explain, like, I've listened to the song so many times and here's the vision I get from it, and try to mesh the two. But sometimes you go in and they have no idea, and that's probably the thing that gave me the most confidence in this business, is that um I'd go and watch, and I'd say, well, I and these a lot of these artists I really admired, and I was a fan of the band when I would go in there and speak with these guys, and I would tell them my idea, and they'd go, "That's great, let's do that." And then it gave me a lot of confidence, and that's how I kind of transitioned into writing then too, because that was my beginning with the whole thing. So that's kind of how I got started, and it does feel when you there there just is something, and I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about, that you feel like you're in this little club. I've never felt, you know nervous about somebody being better than me. I am an odd of artists, but once I get in there, they a lot of times, you're just part of the guys, hanging out with them and all that. And
Was there any
collaborate.
instances when you were dealing with any of these groups where they had a definite idea? It's like, okay, we have our concept. We want something to be whatever, but you knew from your experience that this was never going to fly on television, and you
Well,
had to change things around.
yeah, if you look like at Alice in Chains, at like the Jesus Christ pose, that video, um, they had the original idea of the cross spinning in there and all that other stuff, and then we just kind of had to piece together what their vision was, and that was one of those great things of using that video, actually videotape mixed with film. That was shot half on film and it was shot half on tape, but they liked that look of it being chaotic like that. So
Yeah, that had a fantastic. He's actually, and we've talked about this before, but the whole reason we even started this podcast was specifically the passing of Chris Cornell, because he had such an impact on both myself and the co-host, and it was, I always imagined it felt the same way that my dad felt when I don't know, when Elvis died. That
right.
kind of a thing. He was such a generational talent. Uh,
There was several from that whole era that, it, it just Scott Weiland, him, just a few of them that were just real tragic. That's just so tragic, because he was such a brilliant songwriter, just really just brilliant, and just a super nice guy too, is what you can say about him.
Well, and that's always what I wonder, because we get to see through the filter of interviews and through the filter of a very specific and very limited scope, these people who make the things that we love. But I always wonder, in the background, what were they really like? Because you get to deal with them in the process of actually creating those things that are clearly
Hmm.
going to be super important to them.
Hmm.
What was maybe I'll ask this. What was, you said he's for example, Chris Cornell, he was a really nice gentleman. What was maybe the thing that struck you the most about a handle? I'll just give you some names and you tell me what you remember most about interacting with him. We'll start with Chris Cornell then.
super nice guy, extremely creative, took all my input that when I would speak to him, he liked to look back at the video, the way it synced with the song too, and just super nice guy, sweet man. That's how I would describe him.
What about Lane Staley?
Really great guy. I he was in and out of, and if you listen to his music, he was in and out of drug addiction his whole life, and I saw him at some times when I more um, jived with Jerry Cantrell on there, and which that was kind of my more jive. He stayed off to himself, but when he would come out and you'd shoot him live, I don't know, even if he was, a heroin addict at the time, he came out and gave this performance that it sent goosebumps up my back, several times.
Did he just turn it on?
He would just turn it on and live the song, and that's the only way I can describe it. So and that's another sad one too, right there.
And you mentioned also Scott Weiland. That was one of the ones that I always kind of was curious about because he seemed very soft spoken.
He's very soft spoken, just another nice guy, and that I think just kind of I did see him a few times, but that those I had a few small interactions with him, but yeah.
So how much of the process of making the video it goes into, where does the minutia lies? Like, is it like, well, it's about 10% talking to the band, it's about 10% brainstorming, and then 80% technical difficulties? What's the hardest part in putting together an effective and resonant music video?
Well, back in the day when the record companies had all that money, it was it they had huge budgets for videos, and it was great. I always said, if the business had stayed the same, I probably never would have transitioned off into doing features and other things. But because I loved it so much, but the business changed, and the record companies, when the whole digital thing happened, the money was just cut, and anyway, the whole business changed, and so anyways, I would still be doing it if it wasn't that, but anyways, was that the answer to your question? Really, I don't know.
The nice thing about the questions that I ask is there's no wrong answers.
Yeah.
There's just impressions.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of times with these some of the videos are a little off the wall because you're always trying to, these bands always tried to push boundaries, whether it was in the style that they played, trying to establish the sound that identified them as who they were, or whether it
Mhm.
was trying to push the boundaries of what people would be able to accept. Did you ever have an instance where either you were dealing with somebody and the subject was just, wow, that I don't get what you're trying to do here. You need to explain it to me some more, or
I I never, and that's the crazy thing, is I never had that problem with musicians. I've always had stuff like, and if they wanted me to shoot it a different way, I would try that, and I would show it to them. And if I said, you want me to throw that in there, and I had no problem with any of that, as long as we had a little budget and a lot of time. I didn't mind sitting in there and listen to the song 50 times, and watch them play it and shoot it.
yeah, that had to have been a lot of fun. Um, but we watch these documentaries and these historically these historical things that often portray the music labels as, like the bad guy. They're the ones that are there to take advantage of the artist, or it's a big corporation or whatever. So what was it like in real life to have to deal with these entities, these labels? What kind of interactions did you generally have on a day-to-day basis?
Well, just like the world I'm in now, the film, business. It was the record business, and you would have a lot of these business guys around. I happened to meet a few people that a manager in particular that used to manage him, and a very nice guy, and really kind of like took me along, and you know, introduced me to a few people. But there are those business guys. It was, you know, it was a kind of a weird business inside of that. And a lot of the musicians didn't like those guys, you know, like they didn't like them hanging around, you know, like a lot of times too, when they wanted to be creative.
Oh, so going into this, let's say you were, it almost feels like you're getting the golden ticket going into Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, being able to work with geniuses. Was there anybody that you always wished that you could have made a video for that you never got the chance to work with?
Well, there's a lot of bands now that I like too. I mean, there's just um I worked on the Chili Peppers video when they weren't the Chili Peppers. They were just a small little LA band, you know, who was trying to, and we had a little bit of a budget for that song, which they thought was going to be a hit, and it was. And it yeah, but no, I don't know. I'm still a fan. I go to probably a dozen concerts a year. I go to everything that comes around. You know, I like new music too. You know, my daughter, she played in a band and kept me current. I still try to stay current with what's going on and listen to new stuff. Um, I think from making music videos, everything I've made has a little music video in it. You know, when time you put a song in there and you're editing to the same thing, and I'm shooting to that song too. So I still pick every bit of music that goes into everything I make. I hand pick it.
I like that. The Chili Peppers, you did the Under the Bridge
Hmm.
video, and I remember when that song came out, and I go, "Oh, this is different. This is this is." I could see that something special was happening. Those are always really the fun moments where you get to be introduced to something like that for the
Yeah,
first time. It's like you're discovering something, but it's still a shared experience because you're discovering it with everyone else that's listening to it at the same time.
right, right. Yeah, and the when yeah, and it was, if you watch that video again, I was the guy with the camera that was walking with him down the street, but but nobody knew who he was really down there at that time. You know, that was before this whole thing. No, everyone just kind of, and so it was a real easy. We didn't even need to pull a permit to shoot down there. He had that thing. If he wanted to walk around LA. You know, that was his idea.
That's uh that's kind of crazy. Um, was there any instance? I'll give one more music video specific kind of a question. Was there any instance where you had you had a project you were working on for a video with a band, and you thought it was going to be just this amazingly this is brilliant because this song is just this is going to reach everybody, and then it is just like crickets. It's like, what's happening?
Well, back, you know, back when when the record companies had all that money, they were signing bands, and so there were bands that I really liked, you know, that I thought were great, and I you know, they paid me to go on tour a few times and shoot them live, and they just never, something would happen. The guitar player would run off in the middle of the tour, and the whole band's broken up, and I'm like, what happened to that band? That was good stuff. You know, but yeah, so there was a few of those that, and you know, there was sometimes the record companies would, you know, give you $100,000 budget to go shoot a music video for a band you never heard of and you never will hear of, you know, like it was just somebody's idea.
Uh, they'll take those chances. Let's roll the dice.
Right.
This is going to be the next Nirvana, I swear.
Yes.
Oh man. So, all right. So what caused the shift, the industry change? You said they went to digital and it kind of
Yeah,
forced something to happen. What was that?
yeah, the kind of the like I said, for I'll give you the instance for that. So if they would give you $100,000 to shoot a music video for that band that they were giving you in the 90s or whatever for this small band, and then all of a sudden they started going, well, this guy over here is going to do it for 60. And then they start going, this guy over, and then you start thinking, well, I can't make any money doing this anymore, you know. So I kind of just started writing my own stuff. I had several people interested in some stuff that I had written to earlier, and um, I made a short film. This film Hard to Come By, and we won the Manhattan Film Festival, and a Los Angeles Film Festival too in the same year, and that kind of changed things, and people started looking at my scripts and stuff, and from then on, you know, that's when everything changed. So
But you've also done some work with documentaries too. So you've got a wide berth of experience, whether it's between
yeah.
fiction or
Oh
fact.
yeah, yes. At the I kind of near the end of the I did go shoot the I shot the wolf in getting released in Yellowstone for National Geographic, and that was pretty great camping out there in the woods and watching those wolves get released. With they did this whole Indian ceremony around it, so and that was fantastic.
And it's always makes me wonder, you hear about actors being kind of like typecast in a specific role. Do you ever find that that happens with whether it be directors or cinematographers or writers? Do you ever feel like that could that happens to people? Because it looks like you've got the ability to kind of sidestep and be able to make what it is that gives you joy. Do you ever see some people's like, well, that's the action director there, that he always does action films?
Well, I think my real wheelhouse is kind of poignant comedy, but I have scripts that go from everything. I have a super bad script, like kind of high school movie script. I have um, a sci-fi Christmas movie that you know that was going to be made right before COVID. That's still on hold right now. So, and then I had this series. This series was the one everyone liked during COVID, and I started, I developed the script and the series a little bit better, and then a lot more people were interested. We got some producers involved, and um, to the point where it is now, and so
Well, I'm definitely gonna come back to that because I have questions.
sure,
But
sure.
so all right, so I want to touch on documentaries kind of again for a moment. One of the documentaries that I saw that you did had to do with the homeless situation in the 90s. How
Yeah.
did how did that kind of come to pass? Was it something that you just kind of saw happening and goes like, well, this needs to be addressed, or was there some other kind of situational alignment of planets that kind of came together to make that happen?
Um, that that's interesting. My father always volunteered when I was a kid. Like he volunteered for like he was every week he was this volunteer probation officer, and when I moved out here, the homeless problem had kept getting worse and worse every year, and then I met this guy who did this feeding program down on Skid Row, and he invited me to go with him once, and I started going every Tuesday for about 6 years, and then that was my first intro. And when I was doing those other videos and stuff, I understood what was going on down there a little bit, and I took a camera and made a little documentary about it.
when you address such a prevalent problem that has such an impact on so many people, um, how do you feel that its impact? Did you see an impact on whether it be an adjustment on how local ordinances were done, or did you see some sort of a political reaction that made things better, or did it seem to fall on deaf ears?
It did get picked up, and it did get a distributor, the documentary, but the I don't know that it I did show what was going on down there, and the problem hasn't changed at all. I mean, really, it's the same problem. And listen, and this is it's not statistical, but just being in that environment, it's mental health and drug issues. There's this certain percentage that are fall through the crack that use some of those feeding programs down there, and but that's basically what the documentary was about. And it's the same now, though. It really is. There's a mental health crisis. They need to probably just, it, back in the 70s, California, and I'm going to get this isn't political at all, but California had a great mental health system. And when they cut the mental health and closed those hospitals, that's what started the whole thing out here. Is they spilled, and to this day it never got back to what it was before, and so I think that addressing just the mental health issue, it would be huge in trying to solve a lot of that.
And it's always something that I wonder, because we see a lot of people that are trying to shine a light on problems that need to be addressed, that are really serious, and generally I feel like the republic, we're in the republic now, that the public is receptive to what the plight and what's going on. But I always wonder, because we're so separated from everything, from each other. Uh, and I was like, well, what happened? I saw this. Yes, it's a problem. And then it feels like you don't hear anything, and then nothing really happens, or maybe something does happen. You just can't see it. So when you create such a piece like what you did with that documentary, I always it's like, well, that's clearly something that was super important, and everything. And always wondered, it's like, how 10 years later, 20 years later, what
Mm-hmm.
what the situation is, if it had gotten better or if it was still kind of having the same issues.
It has had a lot. I think right now that they are addressing a lot of those issues in our city, at least LA. But it's gotten a lot better in the last year and a half, 2 years, and they are focusing on the mental health issue of it. So that's where it kind of stands now. As far as I see.
Well, on the positive side, I mean, you have definitely had, for sure, a positive impact in terms of perception. The little plaque on your, I guess, on your left shoulder behind you, talking about, "Hello, my name is Frank," and the perception of what somebody with Tourette's is like, and the response from people that have the same affliction, and being very positive overall. I thought that was really kind of cool. How did you come into working on that particular project?
Well, I I had a script. I had a script about it. Very, very strange thing. I write for 3 hours every day. And I at one time I was picking up my daughter from school, and these girls came out from high school, and they were graduating, and they were going on this road trip, and they were in the car next to me, and I just sit there and listened, and I thought, this sounds really cool. Went home and made some notes about a road trip, and then I was gonna do it with one of the girls having a father who had PTSD. But then, just at the same time when I was writing it, I saw this documentary about this man who had Tourette's in England, and it was such a great documentary because at the end of the documentary, the main character who had Tourette's, he still had it very bad, you know, to where he would flail inside of a store or have these outbursts. And they showed it through the documentary, but at the end he said, "Look, it things could be worse. I have a job. I have a house." And it was so positive. I thought, oh my gosh, it's such a champion story. So I threw that in with this, a little bit of that in with this, and then I made a movie that won a bunch of stuff. So
Well, I have to say that I'm fully supporting on definitely some of the casting with that with Mary Kate Wiles in there. She's just an absolute gem. Uh,
oh, she's a friend. And from that time I shot that whole cast, those girls were just fantastic. And I when I was casting it, I always wanted the girls to be friends and get along together, and they did, and it was just amazing, the cast and the chemistry with those girls.
yeah, she's something else. I've always enjoyed the work that she's done, and just kind of she has a brightness of her personality. And if I have to admit, I was a little surprised when we talked to her on the show. It's like, well, she's really a source of positivity, which is just wonderful.
Yeah. See, here's what I, you know, I have two extra tickets for the premiere on Friday, but I'm gonna text her when I get off, and you just brought her up in my mind to go and see if she'll come over there and say hi, that night, and watch it. But she's great. She's just as sweet as person as you see on the screen. She's the best. She's
Yeah.
absolutely the best.
Yeah, I saw it just seems like that's it. If you want a kind of a wholesome, feel good kind of a film, that's a good one to choose to watch for sure.
She's got great comedic timing too, and just she's a very good actress.
So also I wanted to kind of touch on something else that you worked on that just kind of piqued my interest a little bit, because just an individual that was involved in the production of it, the executive production. I saw that one of the things that you worked on was called Halo in My Coffee, and that it was
Hmm.
executive produced by Steve Martin.
Yes.
So, okay. So first of all, just the giddiness in my mind, just thinking of this legend of comedy, and this documentary on uh, poets and musicians. I'm trying to congeal those two things together, and it's not happening. So how did you come to do this? What is this documentary about? I haven't seen it yet, and it sounds fascinating.
A friend of mine had come to me and told me his idea and how he wanted to produce it. And he said um he knew he'd know Steve Martin had this idea, and he'd approach him with the idea about financing it. And it basically was that when Starbucks, back in the 90s, and it still is, there are places in LA where it hasn't gone away. But back in the 90s, there were small coffee houses that you'd go in there, and any night of the week you'd hear. I remember hearing Kurt Cobain talk about he came down, he played at this coffee house that was in that film. And you'd see these great little bands come through there, and they were kind of getting swallowed up by there'd be a Starbucks on the corner, and then all of a sudden this place was going out of business here because they couldn't compete with them. And so that was the whole point of the documentary. But also we went around for this short period of time and just videotaped some great artists. So there were some great artists inside that documentary, great local artists at the time.
That just sounds like a dream to me, just being able to be in the presence of some of these people that really are so brilliant and get to.
Yeah, and I that's and that's really the first time I spoken word night out here, and like where there was these great poets, like really older guys who had just been doing it forever, and it was amazing.
Sometimes you forget, or maybe forget is the wrong word. Maybe, we all get to hear the music, so we understand music and we understand the impact that it can have on us. But it sometimes feels like with the shrinking of the emphasis of the arts in school, in terms of
Mm,
high school and even to a certain extent to the college experience, we lose touch with the impact that other things can have. I just got reminded of it the other day. I was at an Indianapolis Indians game, and they were celebrating the Negro Leagues that were pre-existent, and the contributions that they did, and they had a spoken word bit of poetry at the beginning in relation to the experiences that they had. It's like, yeah, it's like sometimes you forget all you need is content, cadence, emphasis, and it's just it can be just mildly mind expanding for a moment. You get a glimpse into a different perspective that you don't have.
right. I totally understand that.
So, talking about expanding your mind and thinking differently, um, in Through the Outdoor, it's science fiction, it's horror.
Yes.
I want to know.
His-
I want to know more.
Historical fictional thriller would be the exact 3 words.
Tell me about it. I'm on the edge of my seat. I need to know, what is this about? It's about to be revealed to the world on the 30th. What am I to expect?
Well, it's there was a book that was a New York Times bestseller that a lot of people in your area and in the Midwest know, and it's called Devil in the White City, and it was a book about America's first serial killer who was in Chicago in 1893, and he built a hotel with over 40 different secret passages and hidden rooms inside the hotel, and he could come in your room in the middle of the night, you'd never know it. So I that's just the whole story of it kind of fascinated me with this guy back in that time. He was actual medical doctor. So I did have this idea of, I checked out what happened to that hotel, and then I saw, well, what if somebody now had bought it? So that's where my fictional part of the story comes, is that a young tech entrepreneur um, is getting married, but he on a whim he decides this hotel is going to be torn down. He knows the history behind it, but it's beautiful, and he can't see it torn down, so he buys it. And his fiance isn't very pleased with it, but anyways, they both they he goes and finds this time machine hidden in the basement of the there, and it was built in 1893 in the secret room, and he reads this book, and the only thing that they're missing from making the time machine work in 1893 was lithium, which he has in his phone. So he fools around with the whole thing, and him and his fiance there get sucked back into 1893 through the outdoor.
Fun.
and and they're in 1893, and they're going to have to figure a way back in either into that hotel, and um, figure how they're going to get back to their present day.
So, Back to the Future with a serial killer involved.
Right, and it's inside of series and inside a mixed, and I've written it with the series with a lot of history too, with actual events that took place in this guy's life. He was actually, at the end of the day, he was convicted of 13 murders,
Wow.
which, and but he probably did way more than that too. So
What was
but
something that surprised you in your research for this whole thing? You're going through all the history of everything. Was there something that popped out that you would not have expected to be true that was true, or some rumor or theory that was just out beyond the pale?
yeah, there was a lot of written about this guy after he got caught, like, and people had found, but it was just he was just a really a sadistic serial killer, and just with he came from a rich family, and he'd went to as he became a doctor at University of Michigan, but he was caught selling the cadavers that they were supposed to use. And doing, just right away he's trouble, like, and so then
Yeah.
he moved to Chicago and started this whole thing, and yeah, he was a bad guy. So yeah, so I think the tension with this young couple coming in, and their relate I didn't make everything rosy. Their relationship isn't the best when they go there either, so they have to figure out how to get back.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Now, are you a fan of science fiction yourself?
I am.
Okay.
I love I love the original Time Machine, the H.G. Wells, the kind of, with those back then, those were great effects, but that was the monsters and everything.
It's still great because you could, well, sure, I mean, we're spoiled with the CGI that we have today and the effects, but
Mhm.
ultimately you get to see the ingenuity that the people did what they could do at the time with what they had and still
Yeah,
get their idea across. And sometimes, even though it wasn't in any way realistic, it just had a kind of I don't know if joy is the right word, but just had an emotional impact that you don't get with current day stuff.
yeah, that was shot in, I think, in 1960, about right about there. But I I took a writing class at UCLA years ago, and on the last class, we studied the Planet of the Apes,
Mm.
and kind of how that script was the dynamic of that script and how it was written. And so the very last class, they were going to actually show the Planet of the Apes, and the I near the end of the movie, I go out to use the restroom, and I see Charlton Heston out there. He came, he watched them, he stood in the back and watched the movie, and we got to go up, and he answered questions at the end of the movie about how making that movie. But yeah, the reason I was telling you about it with the special effects is his whole thing with the special effects was that he couldn't convince any studio that he could make a human look like an ape convincingly enough for them to. They thought it would just be, so he had to pay for his own screen test to get the right makeup artist to make that whole thing look right before they would give him the money to make the film.
Those practical effects that you can get on some films just are stunning. They're beautiful works of art in and of
I just
themselves.
I just love how they pulled that all off and with no special effects, really, with makeup artists, and just the way they would swing the camera during those fights, and just, it's really great. That's one of my favorite films, actually.
Yeah, the practical effects will always have a spot in my heart. I know I tell everybody, that whether they're horror fans or not, it's like, okay, you've got to see American Werewolf in London.
Hmm.
Even if you don't really like werewolves or anything like that,
That's
but
a great one.
just the effects, you got to see it for the effects, if nothing else. And remember that when it was made, and it's just like keep that in mind and the joy about it.
Well,
Go
let
ahead.
me one other thing about In Through the Outdoors. I shot this at a great studio here with the there's this guy who was an art director for Star Wars. His name's Fawn Davis, and for Raiders of the Lost Ark. He the studio for Mythbusters was over at his studio. So he started this studio called Fonco, and it is they built 11 sets for me. He built our time machine. Fawn Davis, the guy, and it was just fantastic working with a guy like that. And so I did I didn't use any green screen. Everything in there I did practically, with practical effects.
I have to imagine that a lot of the dynamic and a lot of the tonal impact. I'm having not seen it or anything yet. It's got to be a lot of lighting. It's just all about the lighting.
It's a ton of lighting. It's they built this, he built the hotel of, the killer. He built a torture room. He built all this, built the time machine down in the basement, in this and it was just, it is fantastic. Yeah, and it looks, especially when you go back there. So I it, when you do see it in the future, you'll notice that I didn't do the exact uh, um, uh, uh, um, Wizard of Oz thing where you got sepia in the beginning and then it goes to color, but you do see a difference in color in the film when they go back in time.
So you do a bit of a wash.
A little bit wash make, and I actually, and here's a little, I'll tell you a little trick that there's actually footage from that era, original footage that they've colorized now, and we took a little bit of that and squeezed it in there, and it looks great.
It's those little tricks that always make me just giddy in some way. And I guess I should ask that. I mean, this is not directly on point for the specifically about In Through the Outdoor, but through your career, what do you have any tricks that you've come across that you would just, I would never have thought about doing something this way, but I just kind of happened into X and it makes something better. Do you have anything like that to share with newcomers?
Yeah, just I I think if the best thing I ever did was buy a camera when I was young, and just start going out and shooting it myself and figuring out. I I did go to take a few AFI classes, extension classes, just like I did with UCLA as far as writing, just to make sure I was on the right track with structure. But in a lot of ways, I'm self-taught. Like I just I because it went through the school of hard knocks, and really tried to. You learn a lot when you're sent on a low budget tour with a band, and you're riding in a van with a bunch of guys, and you're for 10 hours a day to show up to the next city and to the next show, and then jump out and
Learn how to fix equipment that may or may not have been doused in beer at some point.
yes, turn your day into night, where you get back to the hotel about 4 o'clock. Everyone sleeps till about noon, and then you go have this big breakfast lunch thing, and then we're traveling again to the next place, and then get there, do a sound check, and then the whole every day's like that. When you're on tour with some of those bands.
Man, that had to have been something that was just fun to experience. What do you think is the hardest part? Seeing the life that a musician will lead, going from city to city. It seems like an adventure, to someone like, myself that doesn't get to travel so much. What does it feel like that for very long, or does it kind of wear thin as they're kind of performing the same stuff?
I was lucky because I could go on it for 2 to 3 weeks and jump in there, but I can see, especially the guys you get in a band with, it's a family, and you have this family dynamic where people don't get along, and people argue, and people get on other people's nerves, and you know, the greatest band, the Beatles, they couldn't get along at the end. They get just they rubbed each other the wrong way, even though you're and you see people do that, and it's been the demise of so many good bands, I think.
Yeah.
Just that little rub. And sometimes like Guns N' Roses, you have to get somebody in there that's going to say, hey, look at you guys, just get back together and do you're good together, really, and let's put all this stuff aside.
Yeah, that definitely seems about right, and it that's proximity makes things interesting.
Yeah,
So when you're together
it
for
sure
that
does. But
long,
I had some of the best times of my life on tour with bands. I had some of the best times just hanging out really till 4 in the morning with those guys, and just, yeah.
that's that's just I'm going to be thinking about that, I think, for the next several days, because it brings up such dreamy concepts to me. All the things that I wish I could have done at that time when I was not in a position to do so. The dream concerts that you didn't get to see, the first Lollapalooza or something like that. It's like,
Well, yeah, and I saw a lot of those bands that would, you'd pass them on the road, or all of a sudden this band's playing with this band that night. And there was those 2000, there was a place in Indianapolis kind of by you, I can remember going to a few times, that was like wasn't a VFW hall, but it was a hall that was kind of right outside the city.
I think I know which one you're talking about. There was it was like an armory, like a
Yes, yes, it wasn't. It was, and they had a stage there, and to get about 2,000 kids in there.
I actually saw my first concert there. I went to see Oasis play at that,
Oh, nice.
and
Yeah, that was that era. That was that era. Yep.
I've told the story many times, and it's one of my favorites. And it shows that even bad things can't dissuade you from good music, because the Tyndall Armory is what it was. And
That
so
sounds right.
they had a cover, they're not cover band, but they had an opener that I'd never heard of. And we get there, and the lighting isn't great for this and whatever, and we don't know who the opener is, and they're okay. It's like, but I'm waiting, so it'll be all right, because Oasis is awesome. They're going to come on. The openers finish, and it takes 15 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour goes by. As things are getting set up, it's like, come on, let's keep going here. Let's get to it. Everything's finally done. Oasis comes out, and they sound fantastic. I mean, it's this wall of sound. It's everything
Uh,
you could hope for from it. Now, at the Armory, you could not have bottles or cans or anything. It was all plastic cups and things for the drinks that you would get for whatever. And as the first song finishes, they're going into the second song. I think it's right about in the middle of the second song. Somebody throws an empty cup that misses the lead singer, doesn't hit him. He stops singing, flips off the crowd, and walks off the stage. And the rest of the band's just standing there playing.
oh, that's so him.
They're not sure what's happening. Eventually, they wind down, go off stage, end of concert. It was
Oh my God. So
uh,
him. Yep,
yeah,
back in that day, that was him. Yep.
yeah. So it's in retrospect a fantastic story, but not a great first concert. Um,
Yeah.
no. Oh, okay. So I got to ask a couple questions that I ask everybody that we have on the show. A lot of what we do on Everybody Loves Pudding, we often talk about the intersection of comics with television and film and things like that. So I have to ask, are you by any chance a comic book fan?
No.
No.
You know what? I do love comics in general, but I'm not a Superman collector type comic book fan or anything like that. No. My daughter got me a little into anime type comics, but besides that, no.
Nothing wrong with that. Well, let's say the plan again, the planets align. Marvel's looking for their next big director. They like to get people that aren't necessarily uh, directors that you would often think of for a comic book film, because they want a different take. They want a different feel, and they go, "Hey, Peterson, we want
Yes.
you to direct a film. We've got a whole slate of options coming up here in the next couple of years. If you were to direct a comic book film, since you're not a comic book fan, I'm not going to ask about specific characters, but what kind of comic book film, what spin on it would you put that maybe you haven't seen from other films that have come out?"
Wow, that's a super interesting question, because I love a lot of the series. I love the Batman series. I love the Spider-Man, movies, and I just I but boy, like that last thing with the metaverse type thing, that was a different type of spin that somebody put on it. But I I would like to think about that and put some other spin on it, but because I kind of did like that they did put a little different spin on it, and got you thinking outside the box with it. But boy, what kind of spin? It besides making it too formulaic, and I wouldn't make it too formulaic, probably.
No, no. I always wonder. It's like, well, I'd do a comic book film, but I'd make it a spaghetti western, or a comic book film that turns into, a slapstick comedy, and you never see it coming. Things like that.
Oh yeah, yeah, or put a lot more comedy in it or something like that. I like that.
So there's where you should go. There's something you should pitch. There is a Marvel character called Slapstick specifically. He's kind of a clown character. Think Bugs Bunny, kind of defying reality, sort of a thing. But it's also kind of serious at the same time, and that's what he's capable of doing. There's where you should go. You could do anything with that. Make
Hey,
it into
I just wrote the name down here. Slapstick. I got it. I'm gonna check that. I like the name.
it's a lot of fun. There's so much that can be done with it. I don't know if they ever will. Okay, well, let's try something a little more mainstream then. I've just started doing this question for everybody because I think it has a lot of fun imagination behind it. You're walking down the street. You go into a coffee shop. You go to your table. Somebody has left a genie lamp on your table, and nobody's claiming it. And you clean it off, and lo and behold, into the seat across from you, a genie appears, and he's able to grant three wishes. Now, the thing is, this genie has spent a lot of time in Hollywood, and his wishes are very specific. He can't give you money. He can't give you superpowers, but what he can do is find a way for you to be able to work with anybody that you would love to work with. Who would you choose and why?
Wow. Um, there's just so many. There's so many great actors. Geez, as far as a director, I'd be on the set of Quentin Tarantino's movie, one of his films. I know how he directs. I kind of have studied him a little bit, but I'd do anything on his set he'd want me to do, just to be there and observe him. He's the guy too that also um he picks all the guys that he wants to work with too, and he gets some great actors in there. And I think that 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 his scripts, draw him those actors too. So, but for me, as far as somebody to work with, boy, man, there's so many talented actors. I love the classic De Niro's, and I've always wanted to work with Dustin Hoffman. I mean, even though he's older now, but any of those classic guys, those would probably be my wish. Like to work with a Pacino or a De Niro or somebody along that line. I think in along that same line, even though he's a pretty boy and he gets labeled that a lot, I think Brad Pitt's a fantastic actor.
It seems like everything he touches just kind of turns to gold, because
Yeah,
he takes
yeah.
it seriously and adds a certain level of charisma. He's definitely in a number of my favorite films. And as far as Tarantino goes, he has a clear reverence for what came before. You can
Yeah.
see the films that he references in his work, and it's just really nice to see that passed down from generation to generation.
Well, and also, and I think along the same line of that question is that I'm lucky that we do have a good theater, smaller theater community in LA. 99 seat theaters that are in there, and I see a ton of really good actors that have not become famous yet, and then some I that I love, and all of a sudden one happened recently, but I have seen a lot that all of a sudden they'll get this. His name's Graham Sibley. I've used him on a few of my thing, but he's a great character actor. Then he got the role of Lincoln in the in the series, and it kind of, and then now he's on another series right now called Good Trouble, a Hulu series. But he really, that guy stuck it out for a long time, and now it finally happened. But I see that a lot. And so there's a bunch of those actors, and I am lucky that I I do get to work with a lot of those actors and that I see work.
There are a lot of
And
beautiful
aren't quite
people
as
with a lot of
famous.
talent.
Yeah, yeah. I think like getting back to Mary Kate. I think she's one too that is just. I think she's such a great talent, and but and she just got fairly. She was did Fairly Odd People. That she got that little thing for a little bit, and but she is just such a fantastic actress, and I always wish great things for her.
Yeah,
You know?
she is just awesome. I
Yeah.
always love to see when some I almost felt like I let out a little squeak when I heard about the Fairly Odd Parents. Like, yes, that is exactly where she should be. Uh, well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. It has
Yeah,
been
I can.
just a fascinating little glimpse into what it is that you've done in the past and what you're doing now. But what I need for sure for our listeners, they want to keep if they want to see what you're doing next. What is the best way that they can find this out? Do you have a social media that you tend to favor, or is there a website they go to? They go, okay, this is what Mr. Peterson is going to be doing
Yeah,
next.
I do kind of announce things on there's Magic TP Films on Instagram. But besides that, at my IMDb page, is regularly updated with stuff I'm doing too. So um, yeah, that's about
IMDb is a fantastic tool.
yes.
Maybe they should sponsor us.
They absolutely should. I agree.
All right. Well, thank you again for taking your time to talk with us. When you have your next project, we would love to have you back to tell us about it, and
Awesome, Ken.
so we
It's
can
great
spread
talking
the
with
word.
another music fan.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks, Ken. We'll see you
Take
again.